Samphire Hoe is a productive summer venue which can get pretty crowded with anglers. However, since the two sessions for this video are outside of that season, I've pretty much got the venue to myself. I've headed to the less popular western corner to see if anything's about during October or April. For those who are unaware, Samphire Hoe is on the South Kent coast between Folkestone and Dover. Zooming in on the area, I'll first identify some of the venues between those two ports. There are beaches you can fish on the western side of the two piers, and Folkestone Warren is at the base of a landslip. The famous Admiralty Pier has just reopened to anglers, and Samphire Hoe is another man-made feature, but constructed on the waste from the Channel Tunnel excavations. You approach it from the Dover side on the A20 and through the entrance tunnel to the country park. I've identified where the parking is and where I've fished for these two sessions. My first visit for this video was on a cloudy but mild day in October, and as you can see it's pretty much deserted. There's plenty of parking space and a kiosk for refreshments and paying for fishing, if it's open that is. The parking is very cheap at £2 the whole day, and I'll leave a link in the description to the website where other details are available. There's a zigzag ramp leading down to the concrete apron or terrace where you do your fishing. If you've got a lot of kit with you and considering walking some distance, then it pays to have a trolley or some form of barrow. This is my first time out for a while with a traditional seat box. I don't use it that often since it holds a lot more gear than I normally carry, and I prefer the convenience of a rucksack. This box, however, contains my spare set of continental gear, which occasionally needs to see the light of day. A lot of anglers just fish at the base of this ramp or go towards the left. The eastern corner is good for bass and is a much shorter walk than where I'm going to. The whole stretch is snaggy and a tackle graveyard, and it takes many sessions to find out an area where you're going to lose less kit. The area I've headed to is not snag free by any means, but I enjoy fishing this western corner. There's some dried seaweed on the ground where I'm setting up, so it looks like it's been recently fished. This area is not necessarily better than anywhere else along this stretch, but corners, just like points, somehow seem different. It may just be the psychological effect that gives you a bit more confidence of catching, or there might be something in it, and there could be slightly different currents off a point or off a corner like this. Either way, being so far from the car park, I know I'm not going to be competing for space on this wall. Conditions are good, and I'm eager to set up my Colmic 07 rods, which I haven't used here before. A quick look at the gear. Both reels have got mono on them, which I find more wear resistant than using braid, and I'm expecting to get snagged up quite a bit and get through plenty of hook lengths as I pull for breaks. Size 4, short shank, Camazon B940s are the hook of choice, and at distance I like to use plain leads of 3 or 4 ounces, tied to a weak link of 10-pound line. I bring plenty of spare leads from an ounce to 6 ounces in size. My rigs are simply made from 20-pound mono, with loops set about 9 or 10 inches apart. I bring at least a dozen of these because I'm expecting to lose quite a few. Spare weak link mono is on standby, and so is the sharpening stone, because I am expected to blunt quite a few hooks as well. A cheap alternative to losing those Camazon hooks are these carp hooks bought from Lidl's, which are pre-tied to nylon. They're an ideal shape for the species I'm likely to catch, and I'm using them in the size 2, 4 or 6. I cut the nylon back to about 6 or 8 inches before attaching it to the loops on the main body line of the rig. Here I've got a rig with weight already attached, and a uni knot is used to fix the rig to a swivel at the end of my reel line. The idea is to keep the rig as simple as possible, since I don't want to lose expensive rig making components. Here I'm attaching my hook lengths, making this a simple and very cheap flapper rig. I'm starting with 3 snods, but I'll probably go down to 2 if I'm getting snagged too often. So it's a simple but very effective loop to loop method of attaching the hook lengths. I've got a spare rig already on standby, but here I'm demonstrating how I'm attaching the lead to this rig. The weak link nylon is attached to the end of a rig using a double uni knot, making it a rotten bottom rig. I'm hoping that if I snag up, it's this line that's going to break, and I'll lose the lead but hopefully retrieve the rest of the rig with a fish on. That doesn't always happen, of course, because sometimes it's the hook that gets stuck, the fish will get stuck, or the whole rig will get stuck and you lose the whole lot. But by having the hook lengths and the weak link line lighter than the rig line, you're giving yourself a chance of retrieving some of your gear. Should the whole rig get caught up in the rocks, I'm not expected to lose much reel line, since my reel line is £25 and my rig line is £20. So this is my setup for fishing at distance. For fishing closer in, my reel line is a lot lighter and everything's scaled down a bit more. I'm using the same type of rig, but here I've got a 2 ounce ball lead. If there's no tidal pull, I might change that to 1 ounce, and I'll increase the size of the lead I'm using at distance if there's a much stronger tidal pull. I've arrived with the tide coming in, so it's running from my right to my left. I'll keep varying the distance I'll be casting to try and find a clear spot, if at all possible. Sometimes you find an area which you think is clear, but as the tide changes direction, you find yourself getting snagged up. And if you're constantly getting snagged up, no matter where you cast, the best thing to do is to move to another location along the wall. But you'll be lucky to find anywhere where you don't snag up. You'll find that you get snagged up a lot more fishing at range, and casting closer in may be your option. Sometimes the fish just aren't there though, so my approach is to fish one at range and one closer in, but keep varying the distances I'm casting. Well, that didn't take very long. A bite almost straight away on my inside line. And not surprisingly, it's a little wrasse. These are the dominant species here, although there's plenty of other fish to catch at different times of the year. A gentle lob is all that's required on the inside. So to begin with, it's little knocks non-stop on the inside. That's a bad sign, my first snag, and it's close in. I managed to pull my rig free, but the fish is gone. The only bait I'm using today is ragworm. Wrasse number 2 from the inside. This one's come to the top hook. And I get my first bite at distance. I've probably left my rig out there for too long since it's already snagged up, so it's not really the start I wanted. To try and free the rig, it's just a question of pulling from different directions. If you don't think you're going to be able to pull the rig out, it's time to pull for a break. So that's not good. Didn't take long to lose my first rig, but I am just feeding my way in at this stage, so I've learnt that I shouldn't leave my rigs out there for too long. Still plenty of bites on the inside though. And it's a double shot of wrasse this time, pretty much the same size as the ones before. For fishing at distance, I've now put on the spare rig with a 4-ounce lead and with only 2 snuds. This might reduce my chances of snagging. I decided to concentrate on the one rod for a while. Unusually, I don't get any bites at range, so it's back to chucking in down the inside. Today all the fish seem to be in close. As soon as I chuck in, I get a rattle straight away. At last, some action at range. However, it's the same species and not any bigger than before. Because this session ended up being a bit monotonous, to cut a long story short, I ended up with 12 little wrasse, all about the same size. Only 4 of them were at range, however I did lose 4 sets of gear there. I didn't fish for very long, only about 3 hours over high water. Had I been catching something different, or if the fish were of different sizes, I would have stayed a little bit longer. If anything, they seemed to get marginally smaller as the session went on, so all in all a pretty disappointing session compared with my previous sessions down here. But all my past sessions have been in the summer, when it's pretty much a bite chuck no matter where you cast. But at least this session's proved that the wrasse don't move and are there to be caught at different times of year. I was back at the same location in April, but this time on a pretty windy day. It's sunny but cold since the wind is from the east. I've set up facing the Folkestone end, this time with different gear. I've got the same setup for fishing at range, but I've brought my Arcadia rods for fishing closer in, just past the side of this wall. So, a quick look at my setup. I'm using the lighter Fox FX9 reels on my Arcadias, and I'm using the medium strength tip on the rod which is used for ledgering. I'm using the same sort of flapper rig for fishing at distance on my 07 rod, but plastic aphis booms for fishing down the side. And the hook lengths are lighter with size 8 Aberdeen style hooks. My other Arcadia is set up for float fishing. I don't know if it's going to be any good at this time of the year, but I've had some good success using it in the summer, catching quite a lot of pollock, some of which are of decent size. I'm starting with an 18 gram float, but if needs be, I've got others of different sizes to change to. At the business end is a size 8 hooked 10 pound fluorocarbon. That's attached to a small swivel, above which is a 3/4 of an ounce bullet lead. The float is sliding, so I've got a bead above the float, then a stop knot further up the line. That's adjustable, so I can fish at different depths of the water. The rest of my gear is similar to what I've had before, apart from the range of floats. I carry these with their corresponding appropriately sized drilled bullets, which I've tested before, in a bucket of water at home. Spare hooks for the boom rig, and the cheap Lidl hooks for fishing at distance. And of course a couple of bags with plenty of spare leads. Again, it's just a sideways swing or short lob to cast out the inside rig. That's only going to be used up to about 10 metres from the wall, and for quite a bit of time I'll be trying right against the edge. With the smaller hooks, smaller bits of ragworm on, I'm hoping to catch something other than wrasse. The 8 pound or 10 pound hook lengths that I'm using are still strong enough to land something decent, but smaller hooks allow me to try and fish for some of the other species, like mini species that are present. These can show up anywhere along the wall, but in my experience they seem to be more on the eastern side than this west side. Whether that's true or not is debatable, however it'd be nice to catch something different on this session. And it would also be nice not to lose that many rigs fishing at distance. On this session, I'm not really fishing what I consider to be the right tide for the venue. I've arrived with the tide on its way down. The tidal pull is from left to right, and I'll be fishing over low water, which is not really the best time to fish here. I've had more success in the past fishing over high water, with the tide running from right to left, particularly when float fishing. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Little knot straight away, but unlike last session, it's at a distance rod. get snagged, but seem to be able to pull through. Once again, it's a little Wrasse first cast. Then a bite on the inside line. But this time the Wrasse is a bit smaller. Generally speaking, in the past I've had my bigger Wrasse fishing at range, with smaller examples coming from the inside. I'm not sure that fishing with these booms makes a lot of difference, but one of the advantages they have over my flapper rigs is that I can move the booms where I want along the line, so I have the flexibility of positioning them wherever I want. It helps to nip off the end of the ragworm to make sure nothing's hanging below the bend of the hook. Little Wrasse, just like little bream, can peck away at your bait and tug at the ends. Another bite on my distance rod, but this time I'm firmly snagged. I can feel the fish on, but I can't get it out of the snag. I need to try and shift it from a different angle. I tried from left, but eventually I had to pull for a break. Fortunately, the weak link worked, and I just lost the lead and the top hook length. The bottom hook, however, was bent out of position and also needed resharpening, but at least I didn't lose the whole rig. In the meantime, another small Wrasse hooked itself on the inside line. Time to replace the lead on the distance rig. There's very little tidal pull, so 3 ounce lead is big enough. With both rods back in action, it's the inside line which is now producing. But then I get one on a distance rod, still only small Wrasse though. It then goes quiet for quite a long spell. It gets colder, and with the lack of activity, I decided to try the float for a change. My initial choice of float was too small for the wind, so I've scaled up to a piker of 25 grams. Because I'm trying to catch something different on this, I'm using fish baits, a little bit of bluey. Normally I prefer to use a bit of small sand eel, since I've caught quite a lot of pollock on that. However, sand eel seems to be pretty hard to come by at the moment. The tide seems to have stopped running altogether now, so having tried on the right hand side, I now have a go on my left. Unfortunately, it didn't produce any bites, so it's back to bottom fishing. Bites resume at range, but once again I'm snagged. I'm unable to budge the rig, so I have to pull for a brake. I lost that rig, so I had to reset up from scratch. So far, so good with the inside rig though. Though this rig got snagged, fortunately I managed to free it. And you've guessed it, there's another Wrasse on. I cast a bit shorter this time, and I get a bite straight away as the rig is hitting the bottom. Unfortunately, the fish comes off. Later on in this session, I got a massive pull down on this rod. I strike and feel a big fish on. Unfortunately, I can't move it from the snags. I have had decent sized wrasse from here, and the odd bass as well, but it seems that my luck is just not in on these two sessions. Then I get a bigger knock on the inside line and pull in something different. This dogfish was a bit of a surprise so close in, and it wanted to curl itself up straight away. It takes a little bit of untangling from the rig. The wind changed direction and it warms up a bit. Time for another go on the float. I should really have deepened the depth I was fishing and tried ragworm in order to get a bite, but I didn't do that because I suspected it would only catch wrasse. I think I'll wait for the summer before I try float fishing again. I finished the session by fishing both of my ledgering rods close in. Bites picked up as the tide started coming in. I lost a decent sized fish which broke the hook length on the Arcadia rod. Unfortunately, I didn't have my camera switched on at the time. It could have been a bass, but we'll never know. It got wrapped up in some line down the inside and I couldn't free it. I did have a couple of wrasse on the 07 close in, but then I'd lost that rig. Although I fished on for another hour or so and caught a few more wrasse, I'll finish this video on this last fish. Unfortunately, it's something different. A smaller mini species fell off earlier on, but this one's come in, and it might seem strange, but this has made the session for me. It's a fairly large blenny of some sort.